It's tabletop time!
I'm Jazza. I'm Rob.
I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Dave.
Come closer.
Hi everyone.
Closer.
Hello. It's tabletop time.
Closer.
And today... Oh, do I have to get even...
Yeah,
and
just closer. Too close.
Today, we're going to be making D&D characters. Woo! To use in a little one-shot that we do, which should be pretty cool. And they're very lucky because they're getting a DM who is not only making the complicated parts of their character sheets, but also making and painting their miniatures. So,
Yay!
Thank you. That's what I was waiting for. So I'm going to get them all in one by one, and we're going to talk about what they want visually for their character, what they're thinking, what they're going to look like, what equipment they're going to use, so that I have some fuel to make it in Hero Forge for them and paint it up.
D&D Dynamite! D&D That's my experience of Dungeons and Dragons.
All right, next person.
I am playing an elderly former barbarian. I say former barbarian because he's deciding he's not, but he can't escape the fact that his whole life he's dealt with problems, been dealing with conflicts through violence in his tribe or whatever. So he's grown up in the mountains and been the barbarian and blah, blah, blah. He's putting that all behind him. He wants to be a functioning member of society in his older years. He's got a big, long, like white grey beard. He's losing his hair. He wears glasses.
I feel like I should be taking notes.
His job is like a collector. So he's like a tax collector or whatever it is that he goes and is assigned to places to pick up things and blah, blah, blah. But often things go sour because people, are a bit resistant or rebellious or whatever it may be. And sometimes he just falls back into that trap of dealing with things with a good old slam. Can I make a request? Please don't hate me. I want 2 minis. Because I want him to it's like his thing. It's like the Superman thing. Just so he rips it off and is just cliche barbarian, but just like old man barbarian. Yeah. With robes on the floor. Jeremy thinks it's a great idea.
Oh, look, it's a great idea. It's fine. It's just added 2 hours to the painting time though.
Sweet.
Cool. That's fine because the thing with Hero Forge is once you've done the basic design, it was really easy to just repose it and save it as another file. So I basically just grabbed the model I'd already made and then, yeah, exactly that, reposed it. Speaking of Hero Forge,
This video has been brought to you by the fine people at Hero Forge, an online character creator. Look between your dozens of races, thousands of customizable parts, complete posing flexibility. Your amazing models can be printed in many different ways, sent to you in plastic, even an exciting and exquisite brass. If 3D printing is your game, perhaps you'd like to download an STL. I, Dave, thoroughly recommend it and use these models in my own personal D&D games. Did you know Hero Forge has mounts? Well, yeah, it's got mounts. Also amazing new additions such as wheelchairs. Very cool for inclusiveness. Nice work, Hero Forge. And for all our viewers, we can offer you a sweet 10% off code. That's right, it's tabletop time. Links in the description.
thanks again, Hero Forge. So diving into Jazz's As of Unnamed Barbarian, I grabbed my contrast pots and got to work. I'd used the color features in Hero Forge, which was really good for setting up how I was going to paint these models, and I tried my best to match the contrast paints to them. But as with any paint range, they're limited to just the colors that they have. So to get closer, I actually started mixing my contrast. This is something I've been doing recently. I found that they actually mix together really well. So oftentimes I now use black mixed with several of the browns, for example, or greens to create really interesting robed colors for cultists and other things that I need to paint quickly, but should have a dirty and varied look. The undercoat was a strange blue color, and I mixed that with some Space Wolves gray and then one of the brighter blues to try and dull down and get that mid mid-tone of a sort of softer but a little bit cold and less vibrant blue. For the most part, this model was fairly easy to paint in contrast. It was posed in such a way that it had enough different areas, enough wide spaces, open large areas, but it was all organic. Contrast works best when used on organic surfaces. That's cloths, fabrics, furs, hair, skin. It's at its weakest on large flat surfaces where the contrast paint pools and kind of leaves some tide pools and staining marks that don't look very good on the finished product. So I hadn't mentioned, but I was working to a little bit of a time limit. I was at about 45 minutes and was my maximum time I wanted to spend on each of these models because they were for a one and done sort of 1 hour of play adventure. These weren't going to be living on in campaigns indefinitely. So with that done, I had enough time to get the contrast on each of the models. Personally, I find accurately applying contrast on detailed models takes between half an hour and 45 minutes per model, but that's just me. I'm not the fastest painter in the world, and it's mostly because you have to be a little bit careful as the contrast can sort of pool off the brush and mix with each other very easily. So there's a little bit of careful application even with a really simple system. You're just taking a little bit more time to make sure that you're not overspilling the areas you're trying to paint, but the actual technical difficulty is very low. So do you think you'd say that your barbarian has sent a few people to the healer?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I might send you to the healer and bring the healer over here.
Good segue.
That's what you got me here for. Oh, and here he is!
Hey!
All right, so tell us about your character.
I am a high elf cleric who was bonded against his will by a god. So he daylights as a doctor in a village and, you know, helping people when they hurt themselves. He'll reluctantly heal people with his clerical powers. He'd prefer to stick to natural medicine.
Would you say you wear armor or no?
Maybe like a thick leather apron.
Cool. So you're gonna be a cleric without armor. Mm-hmm. Cool. No worries.
Yep, everyone's
There's some insider knowledge here. There's an expression on Dave's face I don't like.
Do you have a weapon? Are you proficient?
Scalpel?
Okay. Rob's model was interesting. He described a D&D cleric, but he described one that doesn't fit any of the things I'd think of. He's not wearing armor, all but an apron. He's basically described himself as preferring to use surgery than clerical magic. So I guess in the end, that's what I went with. Kind of my idea of a fantasy elf who is sort of an old bone saw, a medieval doctor. He's got that sort of leather doctor's bag that I picture when I think of old school traveling doctors. And then he holds a potion aloft in his hand, the ultimate alchemical concoction that can effectively solve any woes in the world of D&D when his other magic may not be able to, or if he's unwilling to use it. I don't know if he knows this, but in D&D, high elves kind of have very strange skin tones. I was like, well, how am I going to paint this? And I just mixed together some random contrast paints. I was like, I'll get some bone color and I actually had to dilute it. I just grabbed some paint medium, mixed it in with the contrast, and as usual with my experience with these contrasts, they mix super easily. So with the paint medium in, it had massively lightened the tone and allowed me to paint that skin color fairly easily. The rest of Rob's model was straightforward. It's pretty much following the same method as the previous, just some browns for the leathers, making sure to mix some colors and use various tones. The gloves, a different color to the apron, silver gray hair and a black bag. There was some little pine cones on the base and some stone, but all of that was just simple contrast colors. So overall, I actually think this was the easiest model to quickly put together. I didn't have to do much thinking with it. Musical chairs. Tell us about your character.
I'm a halfling, and I'm a bard, and I play the hurdy-gurdy.
Halfling bard hurdy-gurdy? Woo! One person out there was like, woo!
Yeah.
What do you look like? That's what I want to hear. I'm going to make minis, so I need to know looks.
I wear a really, really nice hat. I reckon he wears a teal clothing set. It's teal. Because I just really like teal.
Are you a predominant magic user if you were to get into a scuff, or are you, because we're going to be fighting monsters, so
Yeah.
or are you more of, do you have swords, bows?
I think I have a bow as well.
So we have one person who may be competent in combat. Would you wear any armor, would you say?
I mean, throughout my travels, I do have some basic yeah, very
light
basic
adventuring gear.
Yeah, but I cover that most of the time.
Yeah, of course.
Because like
Flashy gear has to go on top
yeah,
of
I'm a bard. I like
that
I'm a
D&D
performer.
boiled leather armor.
No, yeah.
Cool. Awesome. All right, well, I think I have a pretty good idea of what to do for people.
Can I have a companion?
What kind of companion?
I like birds.
Okay.
One that kind of, it sings along to the music that I play.
I love it. You're a pet bird that sings along with you. Love it. Doing it.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive in. Making Jeremy's character in Hero Forge was a bit of fun. There's a lot of cool bardic fancy jackets and things like that, which was super suitable. And here was a good example of how I could use the inbuilt color features of Hero Forge to actually kind of get the... He asked me for teal, so I tried to make a teal look. I think it worked. There are a few fancy hat options, and that was the most important thing with Jeremy's character. He specifically requested a fancy hat. We had top hat with feather, but why take either of those where we have whatever this monstrosity is? So that is definitely what Jeremy's character is being inflicted with. This ridiculous hat. I think it's a Janissary's hat. I don't even know what that is, but I love it. Driving forward, I painted him out in contrast, and again, fairly simple. The only thing on the model that was something to think about was, once again, the browns. So many browns. He had a bow, he had a quiver, he had arrows, he had some leather straps, he had also his violin or his lute. So many little elements that all require slightly different tones of brown if you want them to look unique. But again, with some mixing and just using the standard browns available, it wasn't too difficult. So it was time for me to see if I could take it a little bit further. Jazz's model struck at me as the best example of one that I could do really simple skin highlighting. So I grabbed the pale flesh tone from Valero's range and I just dived in on that skin, doing some soft, sort of almost glaze consistency blends to mix in with hard lined, simple line highlighting on all the musculature on his bald head. And the model and the sculpt itself lended super naturally to doing that. And I think it immediately elevated it very quickly. The whole process on both models probably only took me 10 minutes. I then continued that trend with everything. So grabbing a bone color for the robes to just do some simple line highlighting, and then a brown for the leather straps, white for the scrolls in the hand. It wasn't too difficult to just go through and basically upgrade every facet of both of these models with a fairly quick and routine method. And I think it shows off that it's worth it. You barely even realize it was a contrast paint job in the first place once you got the line highlights on, which is pretty cool. It just looks like a basic paint job. So that's one of the real merits to this experience. To finish off Jazz's model though, the one where he's holding his cup and his scroll, I couldn't help but splotch a little bit of wet blood technical effect on his knuckles, just enough to make it look like he'd sort of cracked his skin getting into a brawl as a brutal barbarian. And again, that one's a bit subtle. I don't know how much it shows up, but it looks cool and it makes me happy. And that's the number one point of painting, right? Make yourself happy. Moving on to Rob's followed a really similar principle to Jazz's. It was a process of effectively applying some line highlights that were appropriate for the base colors, including the skin tone, and just trying to elevate it a little bit. On Rob's model in particular, I found it was the white shirt that just benefited so much from this step. The skin tone had kind of washed up onto the edge of the sleeve a little bit, and that yellow tint on something that's meant to be white completely blended the two areas and made it really muddy. So coming in with just a pure white and doing all the line highlighting on that shirt definitely made it distinct from the rest of the model, which was super cool. The other main thing I did with Rob's model is he actually mentioned quietly that he wanted to have a bloody butcher's apron. So I grabbed a brush, I made a makeshift toothpick because of all things I couldn't have one, so I just cut a cotton swab in half and just started flicking the brush over the cotton swab to get some splashing effects. So now he's got sort of some nice technical blood splashed all up and down his apron. Finally, we moved to Jeremy's model. And this was the one I probably spent the most time on highlighting. I felt that overall, the colors I'd used and the effect of the whole paint job looked good on Hero Forge, and it looked the most muddy on the actual model once painted. So it was the one I felt needed the highlighting a little bit more. So I went in and highlighted the top of all the little cross hatches on his quilted jacket, all the wood areas. It was rough and quick highlighting, but it was still like most of the areas. Whereas the previous two models that I'd done, it was very much more the higher areas, the very obvious places to highlight. With Jeremy's model, I just kind of highlighted the whole thing. The final step I did on his model was actually to paint the wood grain on the base. It's actually my favorite basic base of all the Hero Forge ones. I think the wood grain prints up beautifully and it looks really good, and with a little bit of a dry brush or wash and a line highlight, it just looks really natural and awesome. So it's an area that I could really uplift and make look a lot better on the model, which I think is really cool. So I really recommend trying out the wood grain texture on your Hero Forge models. And with that, I could lean back and look at my quick work complete. Go for what? Am I picking up where I left off?
Action!
Am I picking up where I left off? All right, we're done, and I'm pretty happy with them. I think we've come up with some great results for their characters, but they're not going to know until we actually play. In a little bit, we will do our first little one-shot adventure, which will involve miniatures and combat, and their somewhat less than perfect characters for gameplay. But speaking of somewhat less perfect characters for gameplay, in our next One Shot Wednesday video, for a little bit of a change, I'm actually going to be taking you guys through how to create your first characters in Dungeons and Dragons, which I know for a lot of people in our comments, we've been asking, like, how do I create my first character? How do I get into this? So D&D is probably one of the more stat heavy, like rules heavy ones. So we're going to dive into turning these concepts and these miniatures into playable characters that will be just as suboptimal as they described for all you hardcore D&D fans. We're going to make sure we have fun with this and just play silly and fast and loose. So I really hope you stick around for that. If you like this video, make sure to chuck in a like and subscribe and all those YouTubery things that you're used to seeing. I'm quite sure by this point our amazing patrons are scrolling down here, and really, thank you so much for your support. It's through your support that we get great ideas and suggestions, as well as allows us to make these videos that hopefully you're enjoying as much as we're enjoying creating them. And with that, I have to say goodbye. I got nothing for you. I'm not an awkward person. You've never seen me do any kind of awkward outro. The channel's not known for that. So, yeah. Are you still here?
Yeah, do something.
Oh.
It's not done yet. We're not done. There's